I used to like camping, that feeling of disconnecting, the silence. I grew up near state parks and forests, so it always felt normal to go out into the woods for a few days and just exist. No phone, no deadlines, just the trees, a campfire, and the kind of quiet you only find far from pavement. But that changed after one trip that still sits in my head, years later, clear as glass. I've never gone back out since. I never will. It was late September when I went. I remember because the leaves had just started to turn. Reds and yellows in the treetops, but the ground hadn't started collecting them yet. It was that perfect transition between summer heat and fall chill. I'd taken a long weekend off work and decided to head up to Bear Creek Ridge, a lesser-known section of national forest about 3 hours from where I lived. Not a big park. Most people didn't even know about it unless they were into hiking. I'd been there once with friends years back and remembered it being peaceful and secluded. This time I went alone. I had no issue camping solo. I'd done it plenty of times. I brought a tent, sleeping bag, food, water filter, a solid knife, first aid kit, the basics. I planned to hike in Friday morning, set up camp near the old creek bed by midday, stay 2 nights, and hike out Sunday. When I pulled into the gravel lot at the trailhead, mine was the only vehicle. A dented old map board stood nearby with faded markings. The plastic cover cracked and yellowed. The trails weren't well maintained anymore, but that was fine with me. I followed the creek trail, which was mostly flat and followed a gentle slope into a small valley. The hike in was quiet. No other hikers, just the sound of my boots in the dirt and the occasional bird call. I passed a few old tree stumps with moss growing over them, saw deer tracks in a muddy patch, and a fallen log with fungus growing in fans along the side. Real quiet country. I reached the creek bed around noon and found the clearing I remembered. It was a wide, grassy area with a few large stones near the edge of the trees, probably from an old fire ring. The creek itself was almost dry, just a trickle of water winding through rocks, enough to refill a bottle if filtered. I pitched my tent, built a new fire ring, gathered some dry wood, and made lunch. For the first few hours, it was just peaceful. I sat on a log, ate a granola bar, drank filtered creek water, and watched the sunlight through the branches. I was completely alone. Later that afternoon, I walked a little up the ridge, maybe half a mile, and found an old overgrown game trail. It led to a spot with a better view of the forest canopy. I stayed up there for a bit before heading back. I remember feeling a little uneasy on the walk back. Not scared, just alert, like something was off. The woods were quiet, maybe too quiet. No wind, no rustling. But I chalked it up to being alone in a remote area. That night, I lit a small fire and made a hot meal. As it got dark, the temperature dropped, and the sky filled with stars. There was no moon that night, just a blanket of stars overhead and the crackling fire. I turned in around 10 p.m. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of sticks snapping. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer. It was the woods, after all. But the sound wasn't just 1 or 2 cracks. It was steady, like footsteps, crunch, pause, crunch, pause, coming from the direction of the trees, near where the creek bends out of sight. I stayed still, didn't unzip the tent, just listened. The steps got closer, then stopped. For a long time, there was nothing, just silence. I sat there, breathing slow, ears straining. Then I heard it again, one more crunch, just a few feet from the tent. I sat up and quietly reached for my knife. I didn't have a gun on me. I normally don't when I camp, but that night I wished I did. I held the knife in my lap, listening. There was a faint rustle, then nothing. I must have stayed like that for an hour before I finally laid back down. I didn't sleep much the rest of the night. When the sun finally came up, I got out and looked around. There were footprints, not mine. They were faint but there, just a few in the dirt near the edge of camp. Boots, narrow sole, smaller than mine. They led from the woods to the edge of the creek and then disappeared again back into the trees. I checked all my gear. Nothing was missing or disturbed. No signs of animals digging through things. Everything looked untouched. But someone had been there. Someone had walked into my camp in the middle of the night, stood near my tent, and then left. I considered packing up and heading out that morning, but it was early and the trail was long. I convinced myself it had just been a hunter or another camper passing through who'd gotten turned around. By mid-morning, I tried to push the feeling down. I went for another walk up the ridge, collected some more wood, and tried to enjoy the day. But I kept glancing at the tree-line, watching. I didn't light a fire that night. I didn't want to draw attention. I ate cold food in the dark and sat inside my tent. I kept my knife nearby. I didn't fall asleep easily. Every sound outside made me flinch. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps. This time, they didn't come from the trees. They were already close. Too close. Like someone had been standing near the tent for a while, waiting. I sat up instantly. I didn't make a sound. I held the knife tight. Whoever it was, they moved slowly. One step, then another, circling, then stopping, then 2 more steps. Closer. I could hear breathing. Not loud, just soft, controlled, but unmistakably human. I thought about unzipping the tent and charging out, but I couldn't make myself do it. Something told me not to move. Then came the worst part. A light. It flicked on suddenly, shining through the thin tent fabric. A flashlight, moving in a slow arc across the front of the tent. Then it shut off. I didn't sleep. I sat there until the first light of dawn bled through the trees. When I finally stepped out, there was nothing. No footprints this time. No signs. Just the same eerie stillness as the night before. I packed everything in under 10 minutes. Didn't eat. Didn't stop. I just got out. Hiked faster than I ever had, pushing past every ache and blister until I saw the trailhead. But when I reached the parking lot, I froze. There was something on the hood of my car. It was a dead squirrel, cleaned, gutted, no blood, just the empty body, laid out neatly across the hood like someone had posed it. It hadn't been there when I arrived. No way. I got in the car and drove. Didn't stop until I was back on the highway. That should have been the end of it. But about 2 weeks later, I came home from work and found something in my mailbox. No postage, no return address, just a plain white envelope. Inside was a picture of my tent, taken at night, from maybe 10 feet away. You could see the outline of me inside, sitting up, holding the knife. You could even see the light from my headlamp on the floor of the tent. I remember that moment exactly. Someone had been standing there, watching, taking pictures. I didn't sleep for days after that. I filed a police report. They said there wasn't much they could do. No threats, no break-in, no way to trace the photo. I even called the forest ranger station. They said the area I'd been in wasn't staffed, and there were no known squatters or criminal activity up there. For a while, I kept expecting more photos, more signs. I started carrying a knife everywhere, checked my locks twice a night, but nothing else ever came. It's been 3 years. I moved since then, changed jobs. I never went back to Bear Creek or any trail since. I gave my gear away, haven't spent another night in the woods. People ask why sometimes. I usually just say I grew out of it. But the truth is, when you're out in the woods, miles from anyone, you start to realize how alone you really are, and how easy it is for someone to follow you, to find you, to wait. No ghost stories, no monsters, just a real person, someone who didn't want to hurt me, not right away, someone who wanted to watch, and who, as far as I know, is still out there, waiting for the next tent to walk up into their woods. And maybe next time they won't just leave a photo. I went camping alone once, just once. It was supposed to be a short trip, 2 nights, maybe 3, just enough to reset my head after a messy breakup and a string of bad work weeks. I had a friend who'd gone up to this area outside the Bitterroot Mountains in western Montana and said it was quiet, open, and beautiful. He gave me the trail name, pointed it out on a map, and said it'd be perfect if I just wanted space. I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going. That was probably mistake number 1. I drove out on a Friday, packed light but smart. Tent, sleeping bag, bear spray, small camp stove, enough dehydrated food and jerky to last. I had a big water filter bottle and a lightweight tarp in case the weather got rough. No cell signal out there, but I had a GPS watch that could ping a location if I needed emergency help. I wasn't careless, just not expecting trouble. The hike in was about 5 miles, climbing steady the whole way. I followed a narrow trail that curved along the side of a mountain and then dropped down into a valley that looked like something out of a movie. The trees were spaced out in a way that let you see long distances. The grass was tall but soft, and there was a clear stream that ran slow and cold through the middle. I found a good spot about 200 feet off the trail, tucked beside a small hill. I could still hear the water. No one else in sight. No one else at all. The first night was calm. I made a little fire, nothing big. Sat with my back against my pack and watched the stars. I tried to write in my notebook but didn't get much down. My head was still full of city noise. Eventually, I crawled into the tent and fell asleep listening to bugs and wind. I woke up sometime in the night because I thought I heard something, like a crunch, maybe a branch snapping, but it was quick. I sat up, listened for a minute, heard nothing else. It's the woods, I told myself. Animals live here. That's normal. The second day, I hiked around the valley. I didn't bring my full pack, just my day bag. I walked for hours, maybe 6 miles total, just circling, exploring. Found a patch of wild strawberries. Saw deer tracks, maybe even elk. At one point, I saw what I thought was a black bear way off on a ridge, but it didn't see me. It moved slow, lumbering, then vanished into the trees. When I got back to camp, I noticed something weird. My tarp was down. It hadn't been windy. I'd secured it with 4 tight stakes and 2 lines to nearby rocks. It was crumpled in a heap about 10 feet from where I'd set it. I checked the lines. They weren't broken. They were untied. It looked like someone had taken the tarp down carefully, then tossed it. My first thought was animals, maybe a bear sniffing around. But then I looked at the rocks I'd used to anchor it. They were still sitting exactly where I'd left them, neatly stacked. A bear doesn't do that. I stood there for a while, just looking around, heart beating faster than it should have. I said out loud to myself, "You're overthinking it." But I still walked a wide circle around the site, looking for footprints. I found one. It wasn't mine. It was a boot tread different than my own. Deeper, too heavier. Pressed in near the edge of the grass, close to where the trail curved around the back of the hill. Just one print, clear as day. The rest were too shallow or maybe stepped over again. It spooked me. I thought about packing up, but it was already late afternoon. The sun would set in a couple hours, and hiking out in the dark didn't sound smart. I figured I could make it one more night, just keep alert, maybe leave early in the morning. I set the tarp back up, but lower this time, tighter. Ate dinner with my headlamp on, kept the fire small again, listened hard. I didn't hear anything weird that night, but when I woke up, my food bag was gone. I'd hung it from a tree maybe 30 feet from my tent, high up, using a rope and pulley method that we'd learned in Scouts. I double-checked the knot. It was gone. Rope and all. Gone. I checked the ground underneath. No scraps, no wrappers. Nothing chewed. It was like someone had just walked up, untied the rope, and taken the whole bag. This wasn't an animal. I grabbed my bear spray and my knife and stood in a circle for 20 minutes, turning, scanning, not blinking. I made the decision to pack up and hike out. I didn't need anything. Just downed water and forced my hands to stop shaking long enough to roll the tent up. As I bent down to stuff the tent poles into my pack, I noticed something else. The GPS watch, my backup emergency signal, was missing. I hadn't worn it to sleep. I always wrapped it around my pack's top strap so I'd see it first thing. It was just gone. Felt like the world shrunk, like my brain was being squeezed. That's when I heard a whistle. Just one. Short, flat, coming from uphill. It wasn't a bird. It was human. I grabbed everything in reach, didn't even care about neat packing, just stuffed my gear and ran. I didn't run in a panic. I kept a solid pace, didn't want to waste energy or fall. But I didn't stop to rest. I didn't stop to check my phone or drink or look around. I just followed the trail. About 2 miles out, I heard movement behind me. Crunches, footsteps, far off but too steady to be random. I stopped and turned behind a tree, waited 5 minutes, then stepped out and walked another quarter mile. Stopped again. This time, nothing. Then another whistle, farther to my left. I didn't think. I just moved. I took a branch path I'd passed earlier, one that led uphill to a ridge. It wasn't the way I'd come, but I figured it might lead to a better vantage point or at least get me somewhere I could see more clearly. The trail was rough, sloped, rocky, narrow. At the top, I found a small clearing, and someone's camp. It wasn't abandoned. It was clean, neatly set up. One-man tent, no fire pit but a gas burner, pot still warm, a folding knife stabbed into a log, and hanging from a low branch, my food bag, right there, like a prize. My heart pounded so loud I could barely breathe. There was no one there in that second, but the burner was still warm. That meant whoever it was had been there less than 10 minutes ago. And if they saw me, I backed away slowly, turned, and ran down the other side of the ridge. I didn't care where the trail went anymore. I just needed distance. I needed to get out of there before whoever had been following me realized I'd found their spot. I made it to the road by late afternoon. I don't even remember parts of that hike back. Just trees flashing past and sweat running into my eyes. There was a pull-off near where I parked my car. A man in a pickup was there loading firewood. I don't think I looked okay. He asked if I needed help. I told him someone was following me, that my gear was stolen. He gave me water and said to wait in my car while he called the local ranger station on his satellite phone. 2 rangers met me about an hour later. I told them everything. I didn't leave out a thing. They asked me to take them back, but by then it was dark. They went the next morning. They found the camp I described. The tent was gone, burner gone, knife gone. My food bag was still there, hanging from the branch, empty. The rangers didn't find tracks, didn't find any signs of identity. Said it could have been another camper, maybe someone squatting. But the fact they took the GPS watch, that stuck with them. They filed a report. Told me I probably scared the person off. Told me I did the right thing by leaving and not confronting anyone. But here's the part that really bothers me. When I got home and unpacked, I found something in my bag I hadn't put there. A single page, torn from a field notebook, folded 3 times. No words, just a drawing, a map, my campsite, the trail, the ridge, and an X marked under a tree beside my tent. Drawn in pencil, precise, careful. I still have it in a drawer. I haven't been camping since, and if I ever do again, I won't go alone. It was supposed to be a quick trip, just a weekend thing. I didn't even want to go in the first place, but my friend Darren talked me into it. He's one of those guys who always acts like everyone around him is being lazy if they're not doing what he's doing. He calls it holding each other accountable, but really it's just a way for him to feel like he's better than you. Darren loved calling me lazy, mostly because I like sleep and hate waking up at 5 a.m. to run 10 miles or climb a rock or cook eggs over a propane burner like some war-hardened frontiersman. He lived for that kind of thing. I tolerated it. So when he called me on a Wednesday and said, "Pack a bag, we're going camping Friday," I didn't even try to argue. I just sighed, checked my schedule, and cleared the weekend. I knew he wouldn't let it go otherwise. The plan was to hit this patch of woods in northern Oregon, about 2 hours from where we lived, a place called Windlow Forest. It wasn't a national park or anything, just dense, semi-protected timberland where logging had stopped a couple decades back. There were still old fire roads and trails cutting through the place, and hunters went up there sometimes, but it was mostly quiet. Darren had found a spot on satellite maps, way off the trail. No campgrounds, no bathrooms, just trees, rocks, and whatever you brought with you. He made it sound exciting. Real camping, he called it. The kind where you dig your own fire pit and filter water out of a muddy stream. I should have said no. I should have listened to the feeling in my gut that said, "Don't go up there with this guy. Not this time." But I didn't. I packed a bag, double-checked my gear, and showed up at his place Friday morning like I always did. We loaded our stuff into his truck and hit the road. He was in one of his high-energy moods. Music loud, window cracked, sunglasses on, talking like we were going into battle. Me? I sat quiet and watched the trees pass by. It was colder than I thought it'd be, and the forecast said we might get rain Sunday morning. But the weather didn't worry me. It was the isolation. We got to the base of the trail around 2 p.m. and parked off a gravel turnout. There were no signs, just a dirt path leading into the woods. Darren grabbed his oversized pack, slung it on like he was heading into combat, and said, "Let's go, lazybones." I followed him in. The hike wasn't bad for the first hour. Just forest, damp air, pine needles thick underfoot. But Darren, in his usual way, kept moving fast. Didn't stop, didn't check in. He had that thing where he gets hyper-focused and just pushes forward, like dragging you behind him was part of the thrill. After 2 hours of uphill climbing and switchbacks that didn't really go anywhere, I asked if we were close. He pointed toward a clearing ahead and said, "There, that's it." The spot he picked was flat and remote. Trees wrapped around it on 3 sides, and a rock face sloped up on the 4th. It wasn't a bad place to camp, all things considered, but there was nothing nearby. No water.
No visible trails.
No cell signal. We set up our tents, collected some firewood, and made a fire. By sundown, we were eating freeze-dried meals and listening to the crackling flames. For a minute, I almost relaxed. I even told myself I was glad I came. That changed after dark. We were sitting around the fire, not saying much. The temperature dropped fast once the sun went down, and the woods got quiet. Too quiet. No wind, no bugs, no animal sounds. Just us. That's when Darren said something that sat wrong with me. "You ever wonder how many people disappear out here and no one notices?" he said, poking the fire with a stick. I looked over at him, thinking maybe it was a joke, but his face was blank, focused, like he was just thinking out loud. "I mean, this place is huge," he went on. "Nobody checks these woods. No rangers, no cameras. You could bury someone and nobody would ever find them." I forced a laugh and said something like, "Okay, man." But my stomach turned a little. That's when I noticed his pack still looked full. He hadn't pulled anything from it. No sleeping bag, no food,
No gear.
just the same stuff pack he'd had all day. I pointed it out. "You ever gonna set your stuff up? Or are you sleeping in your pack tonight?" He smirked and said, "Nah, I'm good." That was it.
No explanation.
No movement toward his tent, just that smirk. I watched him sit there a while longer. He didn't yawn, didn't stretch, didn't even blink much, just stared at the fire like it was telling him something. I told myself not to be weird about it. Maybe he was just tired or trying to mess with me. I turned in for the night, zipped up my tent, and tried to sleep. I laid there a long time listening. At some point, I realized I hadn't heard Darren zip up his own tent. I hadn't heard him move at all. I peeked out through a slit in the flap. He was still sitting there, alone in the dark. The fire was down to embers, and his face was barely lit, but I could see enough. He wasn't looking at the fire anymore. He was looking at my tent. I ducked back inside. I didn't sleep, just laid there with my knife in my hand, listening to every sound. I didn't hear him move once. In the morning, I stepped out and stretched, pretending everything was normal. The fire was cold, his tent still untouched, but Darren was gone. His pack was gone too. No note, no sign of where he went. I called his name, waited, nothing. I figured he went to take a piss or scout the area. I boiled water and made instant coffee, ate a protein bar, kept checking the treeline. Still no sign of him. By 10 a.m., I started walking in a wide loop around the site. I found no trail, no tracks, just empty woods. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. His boots, not just boots. His exact pair muddy, scuffed-up trail boots, sitting by a fallen log, just sitting there, laces tied, upright, like someone had stepped out of them neatly and walked off barefoot. I looked around. The ground was soft with leaf litter, and there were no footprints around them. Nothing. I picked them up. They were empty, still warm inside. I carried them back to camp and set them next to his tent. Still no sign. By noon, I made a choice. I wasn't going to wait. I packed my gear fast, stuffed everything into my bag, and started heading back the way we came. I hadn't gone more than a quarter mile before I heard something behind me. Footsteps, light, barefoot. I spun around, but there was no one. I walked faster. Every few minutes, I'd hear it again. Crunch, snap, then silence. At one point, I stopped and listened hard. I held my breath, and I swear, I heard someone breathing just off the trail. Shallow, close. I didn't stop again after that. I ran. I nearly twisted my ankle twice, but I didn't care. I was shaking, sweating, heart hammering. The only thing I cared about was getting out. I didn't see Darren again. Not on the trail. Not in the lot. Not anywhere. When I got back to his truck, it was gone. And here's the part that still keeps me up some nights. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. Then I drove home and waited. The next day, I called again. Same thing. After 3 days, I filed a missing person report. A week later, the police called me. They said Darren's family hadn't seen him in over 2 months. According to his employer, he hadn't shown up for work in 6 weeks. His phone had been turned off for just as long. The kicker? The license plate on the truck I saw at the trailhead wasn't registered to him. It was a stolen plate, taken from a junked-out vehicle in Portland. They asked me if I was sure it was Darren. I told them yes. I'd known him for years. We'd hiked before, camped before, but then they asked me to send a photo of him. I only had one on my phone from a trip the year before. A detective called back later and said something I'll never forget. That's not the guy we saw on trail cam near Windlow Forest last week. They had a game cam about a half mile from where we'd camped. Just a basic motion-triggered unit mounted to a tree. It had captured someone walking past it around the time I was heading out. The guy in the photo was wearing Darren's boots, Darren's pack, but it wasn't Darren. He was too tall, too thin. His face didn't match. His eyes looked empty. They never found Darren. Not his body, not his gear, nothing. And I keep wondering, if that guy wasn't Darren, then who was sitting by my fire? And what would have happened if I hadn't left when I did? I had no idea how deep into the woods I was going that weekend. It was supposed to be a simple solo camping trip, something I did every few months to clear my head. No phones, no people, just me, a tent, and whatever the forest decided to throw at me. I picked a spot way off the main trails, a couple hours east of the more crowded sites, somewhere quiet. I didn't want to deal with drunk teenagers blasting music or families yelling at each other across picnic tables. I wanted silence. That's all. I started hiking in late afternoon with a loaded pack and a rough idea of where I'd pitch my tent. I had scouted the area before on Google Earth and brought a topo map just in case. I was about 2 miles from the road when I found a perfect spot. A small clearing with a slight incline, surrounded by tall pines and not a single footprint nearby. There were no fire rings, no trash, nothing. Completely untouched. That's what I wanted. I set up the tent, gathered some deadfall for a fire later, and boiled water for a freeze-dried dinner. I sat on a log, eating while the sun dipped low behind the trees. Birds made their usual evening sounds. Wind moved through the trees like a soft whisper, and the air smelled like pine and damp earth. Everything felt exactly how it should have. I felt like I had the whole forest to myself. It was dark by the time I crawled into my tent. I left the rain fly off since the sky was clear. I wanted to see the stars when I woke up in the middle of the night, which I always did. I zipped myself in, laid back, and listened to the small noises outside. Branches popping, leaves crunching here and there, nothing unusual. Then I passed out. Around 2 a.m., I woke up like I always do when I camp. I had to piss, of course. I unzipped the tent, stepped out barefoot onto the cold ground, walked a few feet away and did my business. It was quiet, like dead quiet. I mean, I'd been in quiet woods before, but this was different. No wind, no bugs, no distant owls or coyotes, just dead silence. I stood there, squinting into the dark, waiting to hear something, anything. Then, maybe 20 yards into the trees, I heard a stick snap, sharp and clear, not like something falling from a branch, but like a boot on dry wood. I froze. Now, you hear all kinds of things in the woods. Animals sound heavier than they are. A raccoon can sound like a person walking if you're half asleep. But I wasn't half asleep anymore. I was wide awake, adrenaline pumping, heart pounding in my ears. I didn't move. I stared into the dark, trying to see what was out there, but I couldn't make out anything. The fire had burned down to coals. The moonlight wasn't enough. I waited a full minute, then two. Nothing. No more snapping. No footsteps. Just the cold and silence again. I backed up slowly, climbed into the tent, and zipped it closed. I didn't fall back asleep for a long time. Every little noise felt louder than it should have. Eventually, I must have dozed off. Next morning, I told myself it was just an animal. Maybe a deer or a porcupine. Something small. I cooked breakfast, hiked around a bit, then came back and spent the day reading and carving a stick just to keep my hands busy. I still felt uneasy, like something was just off. That night, I went to bed early, not even bothering with a fire. The sky was overcast, no stars, no moon. Just blackness outside the mesh of my tent. I tried to ignore the creeping feeling in my gut. I kept my small hatchet inside the tent with me, handle under my sleeping pad so I'd feel it if I reached for it. Sometime around midnight, I woke up to the sound of breathing. Not mine, not close, but out there, just beyond the tent. Slow and steady, in and out. I didn't move. My heart started hammering. I could feel every beat in my neck. I didn't sit up. I didn't reach for the hatchet. I just listened. The breathing stopped. Then I heard very slow, deliberate footsteps. Crunch, pause, crunch, another pause, like someone circling the tent. Not fast, not sneaky, just casual, confident. I laid there, barely breathing, staring at the ceiling of my tent like I could see through it. The steps circled around once, twice, then stopped behind my head, maybe 5 feet away. Then nothing. I stayed like that for over an hour, frozen. I didn't hear the steps leave. I didn't hear branches or leaves move. It was like whoever or whatever, it was just disappeared. I finally found the nerve to move. I sat up slowly, gripped the hatchet, and waited. Still nothing. At first light, I got out of the tent and looked around. I didn't see footprints. The ground was covered in pine needles, which don't hold prints well. But I felt that someone had been there. I knew it. I should have packed up and left. But I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe stubbornness. Maybe pride. Maybe I didn't want to admit I'd gotten scared out of the woods by a noise. I told myself maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe. But then things got worse. Later that afternoon, I walked about half a mile from camp to look for a good view of the ridge. I found one, sat on a rock for a while, and when I got back an hour later, I noticed something was off. My pack had been moved. Not far, just slightly. It had been leaning against a log. Now it was on its side, half unzipped. At first, I thought maybe I forgot to zip it, but then I checked the contents. My food bag was gone. Now I knew I didn't move that. I had it packed tight, tied off with a cord inside the pack. Whoever took it had to open the main pocket and pull it out. It wasn't torn open like a bear would do. It was unzipped and missing. That's when it finally hit me. I wasn't alone. I stood there staring at the empty space where the bag had been, and all I could think was, holy shit, that's genius of the guy. Whoever was out there wasn't some dumb kid or drunk hiker. They hadn't tried to scare me off with noise. They hadn't slashed my tent or stolen my gear. No, they were smarter than that. They waited until I left. Took just one thing, left the rest. No sign of violence, no confrontation, just a silent reminder that they were watching me. And I had no idea from where. That was when I realized the real danger wasn't animals or ghosts or whatever. The danger was people. Smart, quiet, patient people who live outside the rules of normal society. People who don't need to tell you they're out there. They let you figure it out slowly, piece by piece, until it's too late. I packed up fast. Everything. Tent, bag, trash. I didn't eat. I didn't stop. I didn't think. I just moved. But I didn't go back the way I came. The main trail was 2 miles west. But if he had been watching me since the first night, he'd know I'd go that way. So I went east, through rough terrain, No trail, just trees and undergrowth and the occasional deer path. I walked fast but careful, checked behind me constantly. Every little sound made my skin crawl. Every bird flying off felt like a signal. I kept imagining someone just behind a tree, out of view, matching my steps. I didn't feel safe until I hit a gravel forest road 7 miles later. I hadn't seen it on the map. I didn't care. I followed it until I found a service building. Locked, but I got cell signal. I called my brother, told him to meet me at the nearest gas station 20 miles out. He picked me up an hour later. I didn't explain much, just said something spooked me. That was months ago. I haven't gone camping since. I still think about it. A lot. The breathing, the footsteps, the missing food bag. But mostly I think about how smart he was. Not aggressive, not showy, just calculated, just careful. That kind of person is the scariest, because they don't want to scare you away. They want you to stay. They want you to feel safe. And by the time you realize you're not, it's already too late. Now I triple check every trail I hike. I only camp near others. And even then I sleep light, real light, because I know he's still out there somewhere, watching someone else, waiting for the right moment, not to kill, not to rob, just to prove he can. I was 17 the summer I worked at Timber Hill Wilderness Camp, tucked deep in the woods of northern Wisconsin. It wasn't my first job, but it felt like the first time I was doing something that actually mattered. The camp had been around for decades. It wasn't fancy, no zip lines, no air conditioning, but it had a certain charm. Wooden cabins, crooked signs, rusty tools from the 70s. What made Timber Hill special was how it leaned hard into the wilderness part. We didn't just sit around crafting. We took kids on multi-day hikes, made them filter their own water, cook over fires, dig their own latrines. It was hard, it was dirty, and it was real. The senior staff were serious about teaching independence. That meant we were trusted with a lot. I was in charge of a group of 6 boys, ages 10 to 12, for a week-long backwoods hike. Just me, them, and the forest. No phones, no contact unless there was an emergency. Before that week, I'd been helping at base camp with the usual stuff. Teaching knots, leading canoe drills, helping fix the same broken rain gutter that always came loose. Nights at base camp always ended the same. A campfire, s'mores, and stories. That's where I got the idea for my thing. See, the older counselors had their signature stories. Mitch told a long one about a guy who kept hearing voices in the wind and slowly lost his mind. Jamie told this intense one about getting stalked by something in the woods. Never said what, which made it worse. But the thing was, all of them relied on atmosphere. They built tension with voice and pacing. They were good, but you could only pull that off so many times. I wanted something different, something more grounded, something you could see. That's when I remembered the glove. My dad's a mechanic. When I was 12, he lost 2 fingers, his ring and pinky, on his left hand in a fan belt accident. He got them reattached, but they healed funny. His hand looked twisted ever since. A few years back, as a joke, he gave me an old work glove with the tips of 2 fingers cut off and stuffed with rubber tubing. The tubing looked like bones. The whole thing was stained and crusty. It was just a gag, a weird little Halloween prop, but it looked real if you didn't inspect it too close. So I brought it to camp, kept it rolled up in my pack until I needed it. I didn't overuse it. That was the key. I saved it for the hike week. That week, I took 6 kids, Eli, Matt, Tyler, Noah, Owen, and Derek, into the woods for 5 nights. We had basic gear, packs, tents, trail food, a water purifier. I also had the glove, buried at the bottom of my bag under socks and instant oatmeal. We hiked 2 miles the first day, set up camp near a shallow creek. I started with lighter stories that night, half funny ones. Second night, I hinted at weirder things. By the 3rd night, they were ready for something heavier. So that's when I did it. We were deep enough in the woods by then that no outside noise touched us. No cars, no planes, not even distant dogs. Just bugs and branches and our own breath. We sat around the fire, tired and dirty, our boots kicked off, everyone full of jerky and trail mix. I told them a story I made up that week. It was about a guy who went missing in these woods back in the 90s. A counselor like me took a group of kids out, but something happened, some argument or accident, and only the kids came back. They said he'd gone for firewood and never returned. They found his bag and hat, but nothing else. Except a glove. I kept the pacing slow. I talked about how they searched for weeks. Helicopters, dogs, the whole thing. But no body, no blood. Just that one glove, crusted in something dark. Fingers torn open. Then I pulled it out. I kept it in my coat, warm and close. So when I held it up by the firelight, it steamed a little. The kids jumped. One of them, Eli, straight up yelped. It was perfect. I didn't overplay it. Just held it up, then dropped it next to the fire, quiet, like it meant nothing. Then I told them to get to bed. They all lay still that night. I could tell. Not much shuffling, not much whispering. That glove stuck in their minds. The fourth day went normal. We hiked another mile, set up near a rocky clearing. I kept the stories light that night. No more glove, no more dark tales, but I could tell they were still thinking about it. The fifth day is where things changed. We broke camp in the morning. That's when I noticed something weird. My bag was unzipped. I always double-check my zippers. Always. I packed it myself that morning before leaving the tent. But the main pouch was half open, the flap loose. I checked inside. The glove was gone. At first I figured I'd dropped it. Maybe it slipped out. I did a quick walk around our campsite. Nothing. I didn't want to freak the kids out, so I said nothing. We hiked the final mile and a half to our last camp spot. A spot the old counselors called Ridge Hollow. It sat between two steep hills, with a creek below and thick woods on every side. It was beautiful but isolated. No trails in or out except the one we came on. That night, everything was off. The boys were quieter than usual. They didn't joke or push each other around like normal. They ate quick and got quiet around the fire. I asked if anyone was sick. No answer. I asked if anyone had trouble sleeping the night before. Still nothing. Later, after they'd all gone to their tents, I sat by the fire alone. It was maybe 11 o'clock. I didn't feel tired yet. The fire was low, just embers and smoke. I fed it a few sticks and watched the glow build up again. That's when I saw it. The glove, hanging from a low branch 20 feet away. Not lying on the ground. Not stuffed in a log. Hanging. Fingers down. Wrist looped over the branch like someone had gently placed it there. I stood and walked over. The glove looked exactly the same. Crusted. Faded. Still warm from the day. I didn't touch it. Just stared. Then I scanned the area. Nothing. No rustling. No footprints I could see. Just the glove. I finally reached up and pulled it down. It was tied with fishing line. And not mine. I didn't bring any fishing line. My brain started turning over. One of the kids. Had to be. Maybe trying to spook me back. Maybe Eli after I scared him. He seemed clever. I tucked the glove back into my jacket. Tighter this time. I didn't sleep much. In the morning, I did a head count. Everyone was there. Everyone looked tired. I asked if anyone had touched my stuff. They all shook their heads. We packed up and hiked back toward base camp. That should have been the end of it. But when I got back, the head counselor called me in. She looked concerned. Said there'd been a report from one of the other groups. Another counselor had found something strange near their camp 2 nights earlier. A glove, tied to a branch. Not just any glove. Described it exactly. 2 fingers stuffed and bent, dirty, worn. They thought it was a joke. Then another counselor reported the same thing. 3 miles away, same kind of glove. I told her it was mine, that I used it for a story. She nodded slowly, said okay. But her face stayed tight. I thought about it all week. How did it get to those other spots? I never left it behind. It stayed in my bag except for that one night. So how? Then something else happened. About 2 weeks later, after my group had gone home, I got a letter from the camp office. It was a copy of a note from one of the parents, Eli's mom. She was worried. Said Eli hadn't slept well since getting home. He kept locking his door at night, wouldn't explain why. Seemed nervous around gloves. Said someone had been in his room, even though they checked all the windows and doors. Woke up with dirt under his nails, scratches on his ankles, like he'd been walking through brush. They thought it was just readjusting to home, but it didn't stop. He finally told them something weeks later. Said someone left a glove under his bed. Not in it, under it. The same glove. She asked if we gave the kids souvenirs or let them bring stuff home. I never responded. I never saw the glove again after that last hike. I thought maybe someone took it, maybe it traveled camp as a prank. But I still think about how tightly it was tied to that branch. The fishing line, the placement, and how it showed up after I'd put it away. I never went back to Timber Hill after that summer. Still have pictures from that trip. Still have the camp shirt. But I don't tell that story anymore. Not because it wasn't good. It was too good. A little too real. And all it took was one glove. Just one stupid handmade prop. A glove that somehow got farther than I ever did. I planned the stop. That's the part that eats at me now. It wasn't an accident or a moment of bad luck. It wasn't a wrong turn or bad weather. I chose the spot. I circled it on the map, even looked up pictures online before I left. I told myself it would be perfect. That's what makes it feel worse, because when it all started, I thought I was completely in control. This was back in the summer of 2019. I'd taken 2 weeks off work for a solo road trip. No strict schedule, just my car, my gear, and a couple of general destinations marked along a wide loop through Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. I was planning to sleep in the car a few nights, hit a couple motels, and camp in the backcountry for the rest. One of the places I'd picked out was a little-known pull-off in a national forest in northern Idaho. Not an official campsite, but legal to use under the dispersed camping rules. I found it on a hiking forum where people shared GPS pins and photos. A small gravel clearing, a few hundred feet off a Forest Service road, tucked between two rises in the land. There were pine trees, a stream a few minutes walk away, and apparently no one ever there. I was 2 days into the trip when I reached it. It had rained the night before, and my tires spat up brown water as I drove. The forest was damp, thick with that cool, earthy smell that only shows up in places people don't often go. I pulled off the main road and followed the gravel for a few minutes before reaching the little clearing. It looked just like the pictures, slightly overgrown, but wide enough for my car and a small fire pit someone had ringed with stones. Old ashes, black and wet, told me it had been used in the past couple months, but otherwise the place felt untouched. I parked with the rear of the car facing the thicker trees and got out to stretch. It was nearly 6 p.m. The sun was still high but starting to cast long shadows across the dirt. I set up my little one-person tent off to the side of the clearing and got a small fire going with dry wood I'd brought. I ate a cold sandwich and a protein bar while I watched the smoke drift up into the tall trees. A couple birds called overhead, and I heard the low hum of water somewhere nearby. It was calm, peaceful, too peaceful. There's something I've come to realize since then. When you're really alone in the woods, not in a campground, not on a trail, but truly alone, there's a different silence. At first it feels relaxing. Then after a while it starts to press in. Your brain starts making up little noises. You find yourself turning around more often, scanning the trees even when you're sure there's nothing out there. It's like your body knows something your thoughts haven't caught up to yet. I went for a short walk before dark, found the stream easily enough, filtered a liter of water, and followed it a little way upstream. I saw a few deer prints in the mud and what might have been raccoon tracks. Then I doubled back. I didn't go far, maybe half a mile in total. When I got back to camp, the fire was still smoldering, and the tent looked undisturbed. Still, I felt a little off. I told myself it was just nerves. I hadn't done a solo trip like this in over a year. That's all it was. But just to be safe, I took my pepper spray out and laid it by my sleeping bag. I also made sure the GPS emergency beacon I carried was clipped to my belt, even inside the tent. I zipped the door shut and tried to sleep. The forest was quiet, but the kind of quiet that doesn't stay still. You can hear twigs settle, water move in a breeze, Occasionally, a small animal rustles somewhere off the trail. All of that I expected. What I didn't expect was to hear the car door. It was soft, so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it. But I know the sound of my own car doors. The back passenger side has a squeak to it. It was that exact noise. Faint, like it had been opened just a little, then shut again. I froze, didn't move, didn't breathe for a second. I lay in the tent for probably 2 full minutes, heart pounding, hand on the pepper spray. Nothing else. No voices, no more noise. I reached slowly for my flashlight, turned it on, and unzipped the tent. The fire had died out. The trees stood dark and heavy around the clearing. My car looked the same. I walked around it, all doors shut, no tracks, no signs anyone had been there. I opened the passenger door and checked inside. Everything looked untouched: food bag, map, water jug. I did a quick sweep of the area with my flashlight beam, heart hammering in my chest. Nothing. I went back to the tent and stayed up another hour before falling asleep. I woke up early the next morning, just after 6 a.m. The air was crisp and damp. I boiled water for instant coffee, then walked around the clearing again in full daylight. I still didn't see any tracks or footprints that weren't mine. But then I noticed something. The driver's side mirror had been tilted upward. Not broken, just moved. And not in a way that could have happened by accident. I hadn't touched it. I was sure of that. That's when I realized this wasn't in my head. I didn't say anything out loud, didn't panic. Just made a decision. I packed up fast. Tent down, gear in the car. No breakfast, no fire. I didn't even brush my teeth. I just got everything inside and slammed the trunk shut, then turned the key. The engine sputtered. I tried again. Sputter. Slow turnover. Then silence. I froze. Battery was fine. Lights worked. But the engine wouldn't catch. I checked under the hood, but I didn't know what I was even looking for. Nothing looked wrong, but the engine was cold and still. Then I saw it. On the windshield, a single handprint, smudged into the condensation, facing inward, as if someone had stood on the hood and looked down into the car. It was a bare hand, no glove, slightly long fingers, smudged enough to miss if you weren't looking for it, but clear once you saw it. I looked around, holding the hood up with one hand, body stiff. I didn't hear or see anything. I walked to the edge of the clearing and looked into the woods. That's when I saw the shape. It wasn't close, maybe 70, 80 feet back, behind a tree, just a slice of a leg, a dark pant leg, and the edge of a boot, still as stone. I didn't wait. I ran back to the car and slammed the hood down. Tried the key again. This time the engine turned. I peeled out so fast the back tires through mud and stones. I didn't stop until I hit the highway. I drove for nearly an hour before I pulled into a gas station and sat there shaking. Later, at a motel, I checked the car over again. There was a scrape under the driver's door. Very small, fresh, like from a rock or tool. And when I opened the fuse box, I found that one of the engine fuses was halfway out. Just enough to prevent ignition. Not loose from vibration. Pulled. Someone had done it. I filed a report with the local sheriff's office the next day. Gave them the GPS pin, everything I could remember. They said they'd send someone out. A few weeks later, they emailed me a note. Nothing found. No sign of anyone. No camp. No tracks. I deleted the hiking forum post I found the spot on. I'll never go back there. That stop was planned. Picked it. Researched it. Thought it was safe. That's the part one keep coming back to. Whoever was out there. They didn't stumble onto me. They waited. They watched. And they had a plan too. I worked as a camp counselor for 3 summers straight. It wasn't supposed to be a big part of my life, just a summer job between college semesters. But it stuck with me more than I ever expected it to. The camp itself was in upstate New York, not far from the Catskills. The drive up took hours from the city, and by the time you got there, your phone was already out of signal and the roads were mostly gravel. It was one of those old-fashioned places. Cabins, no air conditioning, food served in a big mess hall with long benches, that kind of thing. Most of the other counselors were around my age, a mix of college kids and a couple who were a bit older and just loved the camp life. You work there long enough and it becomes a second home. I'd be lying if I said I didn't love it, at least in the beginning. One of the biggest things I took pride in was being the spooky story guy. Every session, we had a few campfire nights for the kids. They'd roast marshmallows, giggle under their blankets, and try to act tough in front of each other while the counselors told them creepy stories. It was a tradition, and I had a great one, a crowd favorite. I made it up the first summer and kept adding to it every year. It was about a ghost, of course, because what else do you tell kids in the woods at night? The gist was simple. There was a ghost who couldn't rest unless he had 2 teeth from the living, and 2 names of people he could go after next. If you didn't give him both, he'd come for you. It was the kind of story that freaked out a bunch of 10-year-olds without making them cry for their parents. The sweet spot. But what really sold the story was the ending. It was subtle and I'd time it just right. See, I was born without 2 adult teeth. My baby teeth fell out, but nothing ever came in. Left a couple noticeable gaps. So for a few years, I wore this retainer with 2 fake teeth in the front, right next to my canines. They looked real enough. Most people never noticed unless I took the retainer out. So I'd end the story slow and quiet, build up to the part about how the ghost finally caught someone, and then, right when the kids were fully into it, I'd stop, smile real wide, and pop the retainer out with my tongue. 2 front teeth gone, just gaps and gums. I wouldn't say anything, just sit there smiling in the firelight. Every single time it worked. Screams, gasps. One time a kid actually threw his marshmallow into the fire and ran. It was harmless fun. The other counselors got a kick out of it, and the kids, well, they were terrified that night, but by morning it turned into one of their favorite stories to tell at home. Remember that guy with the missing teeth? They'd say. It made me a legend, for better or worse. But that was just the story. That wasn't the scary part. The scary part didn't start until my last summer at that camp. It was August, end of the season. The air was hot during the day, but dropped real fast at night. You'd wake up with your sleeping bag damp from dew. That year, they stuck me with the oldest group of kids, the 13 to 15 crowd. They were a pain sometimes, tried to act cool, smoked behind the cabins, always pushing boundaries. But they listened when you gave them a good scare, and I had the best material for that. One night, second to last week of camp, we did the usual campfire routine. I told the tooth ghost story again. By then, I could do it in my sleep. Same beats, same timing. But this time, I stretched it out a little. Tried something new. Added a part about how the ghost used to work at a camp just like this one. Made it more local. Said he watched kids from the woods, waiting for his name to be called. You could feel the air get heavier as I spoke. Even the counselors got a little quiet. Then, right at the end, I pulled the old trick. Slipped the retainer out and gave them the smile. Even in the low firelight, I could see a couple of the boys pull back in their seats. One of the girls actually turned her head. It hit harder that night for some reason. We sent the kids back to their cabins a little later than usual. I stayed behind to put out the fire with one of the junior counselors, a guy named Aaron. We joked about the kids not sleeping and probably wetting themselves, packed up the marshmallow sticks, and called it a night. That's when things started getting weird. The next morning, the camp director, Jason, called a short meeting. He was pale and looked like he hadn't slept. Apparently, one of the younger kids, someone from cabin 3, had wandered off in the middle of the night. He hadn't made it far, just a few yards into the woods before another kid noticed and called out. But when they brought him back, he kept saying strange things. Said something about needing to give his teeth and names before the ghost took him. Said the guy at the fire told him to. I was stunned. I had told the story, but I never said to actually do anything. It was just a scare, a harmless tale. But Jason looked right at me like I was the problem. I said I'd tone it down, maybe not tell the tooth story again. The kids' parents were called, but they brushed it off. Said he had an overactive imagination. Still, I felt off about it. It was like something had slipped out of my hands. I had scared that kid for real, not in the fun, campfire kind of way. And it didn't stop there. 2 nights later, it happened again. Another kid from a different cabin. This time, he left a note. Just a scrap of paper in his bunk that said, 2 names, Marcus and Aiden. I'm sorry. I read it myself. The handwriting was shaky, just a few words scribbled like he was in a rush. Marcus and Aiden were his cabin mates. They found the kid before he made it past the latrine. He was barefoot and crying, but he wouldn't say much, just mumbled about needing to give the names or the ghost would take him. The whole thing spiraled fast after that. Rumors spread, and some of the younger kids started talking about the tooth man in the woods. A few swore they saw him. One even said he saw a counselor digging holes out near the lake. I didn't know what to think. I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was just kids hyping each other up. They'd heard the story, ran with it, and now it was a game to them. But deep down, I knew I had pushed too far. I'd built something I couldn't control anymore. That same night, I stayed up late by the counselor's cabin. Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. I ended up walking a loop around the camp perimeter, just trying to settle myself down. The moon was low, half covered by clouds. Air was damp. I passed the empty arts and crafts building, then the canoes, stacked in their racks by the lake. That's when I heard something. Footsteps, not heavy but fast, like a jog. They came from the tree line behind the lake. I stopped, crouched near the canoes, and listened. Then I saw him, a kid, maybe 12. Ran from the woods, wild-eyed, shoeless, his camp shirt torn. He was gripping something in one hand. I called out quietly, he didn't see me, and ducked behind a tree on the other side of the mess hall. He ran toward the main road, vanished behind the cabins. I chased after him, but by the time I reached the path, he was gone. I never found out what he had in his hand that night. But the next morning, 2 boys were found with blood on their pillows. Not much, just a bit of dried red where their heads had been. Nurses checked them. Both were fine, but one had a small chip in his front tooth. He didn't remember hitting it. The other had what looked like a tiny scrape near his gum. The camp went on lockdown after that. No more fires, no more ghost stories. Parents started calling. Jason had to send out emails. He told me to take the rest of the summer off. Said it wasn't my fault, but it would help cool things down. I packed up that night. I didn't sleep before I left. I just sat in my cabin, lights off, staring out the window at the woods. I couldn't stop thinking about the kids, the way the story spread, the way it stuck in their heads and grew into something real, something with rules and logic, something they believed. And then I thought about the smile, the missing teeth, the retainer. What if one of them thought it wasn't a story? What if one of them thought it was a warning? Before I left, I cleaned out my locker, my gear, my books, my shaving kit. At the bottom, I found something I hadn't seen before, a strip of paper folded up tight. I opened it. It said in tiny handwriting, "You gave him your teeth. You forgot to give him names." That was it. Nothing else. No signature. Just that one line. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know when it was put there. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe one of the other counselors thought it would be funny. But it didn't feel like a joke. Not the way my stomach turned when I read it. I tossed the paper into the mess hall fire pit before I left. Watched it curl up into nothing. I haven't been back to that camp since. I don't even tell scary stories anymore. Not even to friends. I still have the retainer, though. 2 fake teeth still fits. Every now and then I take it out and stare at the gaps in the mirror. I thought it was a trick, a gimmick, a way to get laughs and screams. But now I think it was more than that. I think I gave something shape, something real enough that it stuck in the cracks of those kids' minds. I think I handed it to them with both hands and told them it was true. And maybe that's all it needed to start growing. Now, when I look in the mirror, all I can think is,